She's currently with the Canadian Centre of Intelligence and Security Studies at Carleton University in Ottawa. She also has had a public service career with the Ministry of Defence in the UK. So, and I also add in her bio, what caught my attention, and I think is very important here, is that she has done some work with the DHS Center of Excellence for Border Security at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So very much looking forward to her thoughts on UAVs and their implications for privacy. You have the podium for 10.
If anybody isn't aware, UAV stands for Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, a remotely controlled, semi-autonomous air vehicle. There's all sorts of cracks I've heard about the gender of that. Well, you'll be aware that they're migrating from the military battlefield to the civilian airspace. Why is that? All sorts of reasons. Obviously, it's for greater effectiveness. The military certainly sees it as enhancing capabilities by using new technologies. They also see that there's a risk reduction factor, and also that there's a possibility of force structure numbers being reduced. And in a sense, we can correlate that with the civilian area, particularly if we're talking about law enforcement. In a period of shrinking budgets, everyone's worried about cost efficiencies, cost effectiveness, numbers, etc. What's the best way of doing the task more easily, more effectively, more cost efficiently? That's where UAVs come in. I would also argue we've got supply, push, demand, pull factors operating. On the supply side, UAV manufacturers clearly see the civilian market in the future as being where their big sales are going to come, and sales in the civilian sector are going to reduce or hopefully mitigate the upward trend in military costings for their systems. So in the future, it's going to be investment and development taking place in the civilian side, helping the military side. It's a reversal from what we have now. So manufacturers clearly have a vested interest, push this technology into the civilian airspace. Wonderful. Is it wonderful? It could be. Janet Napolitano, DHS Secretary, has recently said about, I have the exact quote here, so I should actually say it because it's important to get it right. She said, she emphasised that although technology and innovation can help to secure borders and critical infrastructure, the challenge is to find technologies which are not only effective, complementary, and as non-intrusive as possible, but supportive of a democratic commitment to protect the privacy and civil rights and liberties of citizens. So, clearly, the worry is UAVs in the domestic airspace are a threat to citizens' liberties, particularly privacy. You could say we use conventional aircraft now for surveillance, for law enforcement. We use conventional aircraft for natural disasters, search and rescue missions. What's the difference? Ethically, the issues are different but not unique. So we can use our standards, our ethical standards, to apply to this situation. I would just like to say, though, that personally I'm coming from a position where I would embrace new technology, but we do need to see the downside, the cost side. The cost sides are essentially to society as a whole. If you're using UAV technology to surveil an individual, a warrant must be required, it's carefully controlled, oversight, accountability. The problem is surveillance in the public space. And in that sense, it applies both to law enforcement as well as our use for CIP, or border security, or natural disasters. Because when you have those UAVs up there, who knows what they're looking at? What else is scooped up in the eye of the camera that could be used or misused? That is the worry. Now, you could say this is an absolute nonsense. You know, if you've got a UAV up there like a Predator over Hawaii, or for Operation Katrina, you know, it's focused on a key issue. Sure it is, but its cameras can take in other images. We need to know. We need controls on what's happening there. But primarily in my message today is the public needs to be involved in this debate, because if it isn't, the technology that's going to be valued for all of us is going to be resisted. And we've seen that with satellite imagery, with the NAO office. It never came into being because of the worries about privacy in Congress and so on. The same could happen to UAVs, and I would not like personally to see that. I know we have people who are concerned about technology and they sort of say, well, you know, it's destroying of our human nature and our lives and so on, but I don't subscribe to that. So I would like to say that privacy is not an unqualified good. Civil libertarians are concerned about the growing capacity of surveillance technology to erode the private domain, but other authorities are worried about pursuing terrorists, pursuing criminals. We here are concerned about using technology to help with natural disasters, search and rescue, assessment of the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure. So we have to bear in mind that this label of privacy, it's not black and white. As citizens, we have obligations as well as rights. So maybe we have to accept some diminution of privacy in order to gain the benefits. What we need to do is evaluate morally the benefits and the costs. And those are not just private benefits and costs, they're social benefits and costs. And social is the key thing, I would say. Okay, the title of my discussion was something that Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia said in 2001. The question we confront today is what limits there are upon this power of technology to shrink the realm of guaranteed privacy. He wasn't just talking about UAVs and CCTV cameras, he was talking about interception of communications, the internet, Facebook, etc., etc. So, generally speaking, we can say we're all losing some of that privacy that we apparently value, or do we? There's a question about that. And even if we think we're losing it, is the harm as intrusive as perhaps we think it is? Maybe not. The harm comes down to perceptions and consequences. If we think there's a UAV up there surveilling what we're doing, we're going to be worried. That's if we're aware of it. If we're not aware of it, and there's no consequences, because we're innocent people and we haven't been caught doing anything, then why worry? That's the reductive argument. I don't go for that either. It more or less says, if you're not doing anything, if you're not breaking the law, why worry if there's 1,000 UAVs up there every afternoon? You shouldn't worry at all, should you? Well, it smacks of the Orwellian Big Brother is watching you, and we don't want that. And moreover, there are severe consequences to that. It's not just a matter of discomfort. It seems that if we feel we're being watched, we don't behave normally. And we don't participate in the democratic processes and practices. It's what the experts would call a chilling of society. We know that in East Germany, for example, when the surveillance was rife, people didn't participate in society. There were major consequences. We're not talking about totalitarian state here, we're democracies, but we shouldn't overlook the fact that if there was a preponderance of UAVs, a perception that there was extensive and intensive surveillance, it could have a societal effect. So how do we deal with making decisions about whether we embrace the technology? Ethical decision making is usually based on three major things: necessity, proportionality, and discrimination. How does UAVs fit into that? Well, we can say UAVs could save lives, that's a just cause for using it. It can reduce risks, and we've heard a lot here about certainly natural disaster situations. The most controversial area is on law enforcement. I won't speak about that today, but as I say, it's not just law enforcement, we need to look at the wider aspects. The next one is proportionality. We have an example in the UK. Local authorities have tried to use UAVs and drawn up lists of what they might use them for. You know, they'll go up there and look for fleeing suspects or whatever, but also while they're up there, they could perhaps see which of the neighbours has been putting their rubbish out in the wrong place. We call it fly tipping, but I'm told it's not a phrase you use here. Fly tipping is when you dump lots of rubbish, builders' rubbish or whatever, somewhere it shouldn't be. Do we want UAVs up there really surveilling what we're doing with our rubbish? Or what we're putting in the green bin as opposed to the blue, or whatever? This would be a disproportionate use of UAVs. It can be controlled by another means. The last thing on this ethical guideline would be discrimination. UAVs, of course, surveillance in the public domain, it's not just the person doing something wrong that's captured by the cameras, it's Joe Bloggs, who's just out there for having a Sunday picnic. That's problematic, but we have to say, if he's not doing anything wrong, if the take from the cameras and sensors is electronically processed, and almost immediately destroyed if it doesn't link to any of the relevant factors. How intrusive is that? All I'm saying is we need to really carefully evaluate all forms of overhead surveillance, and I would think that would include CCTV cameras, look at their relative merits, look at their relative costs for civil liberties, and then come up with a decision about how we introduce this. I can't see there's any problem with search and rescue missions, CIP. Somebody mentioned earlier on in a seminar I was in about the Alaska pipeline. There's an obvious example of having a UAV patrolling back and forth, a dull task to protect infrastructure. Why not? Particularly in a non-urban area, there shouldn't be too many problems there. And because I see this figure on my left standing there, I'm feeling very intimidated because someone's watching me.
30 seconds.
Just to say, Peter Singer, who you may have heard of, he described new technology like this as revolutionary. Revolutionary in that it could change human behaviour and actions. And if that was the case, it was incumbent upon us to ask those difficult legal and ethical questions now, before we try to introduce it, so that we can then take advantage of the benefits by winning public support. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Angela. That was